Hi, welcome back to Art by Katie. So this week we're going to be doing a male portrait. As usual, I'll be using the same tools I did last video, which would be a Staedtler set, mechanical pencil, a white Derwent, a gray Prismacolor erasable colored pencil, eraser, and 2 standard charcoal blenders. So to start out, we're going to start shading the neck. Most important thing to remember when shading a male neck is that you're going to have a lot of darker, larger figures, because males tend to have a lot larger features just in general. They're definitely more protruding, so you're going to have a lot darker of shadows and a lot larger of shadows. Whenever you notice like a female portrait versus a male portrait, one of the biggest differences you can see is the amount of darkness, like the amount of difference in darkness to lightness, and also the size of those actual shapes and shadows. So right now I'm coloring in the chin and then jawline. You'll notice right away that everything is already a lot higher contrasted and darker, as I mentioned earlier. With the lips, as always, try to keep it so that you're not drawing lines and more drawing shades. Specifically, what's kind of interesting is I picked a reference with very large lips, since I'm used to drawing female figures, so drawing a male portrait was a little bit of a challenge for me, but I still try to keep the same principles of drawing just shades and then drawing around the mouth. So moving on, this is the nose. Male noses, again, tend to be larger than female noses, so you'll have a lot more intense of shadows. And so right now I'm actually sketching this mostly with a 2B pencil instead of an HB pencil, because just of the intensity and the darkness that's going on. So now I'll be going into the cheekbones. So right away you want to get at least a little bit of color down there, just because it's easier to make something darker than it is to make something lighter, and you already know there's going to be darkness there. So behind the eyes, right away I like to start at the top. I don't know if I mentioned this in my last video, but the best way to actually get an eye to like pop out isn't the outline of the actual eye, but that darkness right above the eyelid and then below the brow bone. And so in this video, I also am drawing both eyes around the same time, just because it helps to get a lot more consistency, and it helps that your eyes will actually be a little more even. So you can actually take your hand to the screen and notice that between the two eyes there's exactly 1 eye distance apart. That's another measurement tip, so to make sure that your eyes aren't too big or your eyes aren't too far apart or close together, is make sure that there's 1 eye distance between them. And again, making sure his gaze is right at you in this photo. So try to put your pupils right during the center of the eyes, and then lights almost directly below. A little dark on both sides too. And so I'm coming in with the blender here because I wanted to show the difference that the blender made in terms of like how rough your picture looks. So if you wanted a little rougher of a look, don't bother using the blender, but as you can see, specifically in the right eye, it really makes a big difference in how smooth your picture is. So I'm going back in, making the cheekbone shadow a little darker, and then the shadow right behind the nose a little darker, because his nose is very large, and then he has very sunken in cheeks to accentuate how large his jaw is. Be careful with the blender. It will actually end up, because it's moving around a lot of pigment, you're going to get usually a darker shadow than you were expecting. So that's a warning for that. And then I don't tend to like to draw a lot on the foreheads. I think most of the interest in face is in the bottom half, so you can pretty much do something very light. It's not too important to draw on the forehead. Ears are by far the most underrated part of a portrait. There's so much shadow and depth that goes on in them, and so I really like to focus on those and highlight those a lot. One thing you'll also notice, this is another measurement tip, the bottom of the ears are around the bottom of the nose. His angle, well, it's covered up right now, but I'll talk about it afterwards. If you're worried about smudging your portrait, you can put on a piece of paper, tracing paper, whatever you want, just to protect the face while you're maybe resting your hand over top of it. And so that's what I did when drawing that ear. But as I was saying earlier, the bottom of the ears should be around the bottom of the nose, top of the lip, and then the top of the ears usually will be at the eyebrow level or the top of the eye level, but because he was looking, you were coming from sort of a downward angle, the ears actually hit right below his eyes. So that's not normal, it just had to do with the actual reference I chose. And so for hair, this hair is a little different. It's a lot greasier and darker, so you should probably be using your darker B pencils. Like I primarily did this with my 4B and my 6B pencil, which is why it's a lot darker. And also, feel free, if you're getting really bored with drawing hair, I tend to get really bored very easily drawing hair, feel free to just actually go back in and maybe look at some things that you didn't notice before in your face. So I think right around here, yeah, I got really bored with drawing just big dark shapes, so I'm coming in with lights like I usually would do at the end of the portrait. Just at the nose, those eyelids, right at the top of his cheekbones, around his mouth, lips, and then top of the chin. That's almost always where all lights in portraits will be. There's of course exceptions, but that's primarily where you'll find really bright highlights. And then you can also highlight the ears if you really like ears. So next I'll be going to the other side of the hair just because it's easier to work from bottom to top in my opinion than it is to work from top to bottom. And so the shape of this hair, it's just kind of randomish. I tend to not pick very clean haired people. So you'll see a lot of just sort of random block-ish wispy shapes. So feel free to honestly just go crazy and freestyle your own hair. It's hair. I don't think anybody pays too much attention to if it's exactly like the reference. Like the difference in how good a nose is versus how good hair is, in my opinion, very different. And so here I'm just finding the major shapes and then the major shadows in the hair. So since it's curved, since it's gelled up and back, you're going to have a dark on the top, a dark on the bottom, and then the light right in the middle. And then he's got a little, sort of like a part there, which is what I saw, and then same sort of principle. It's a part, we don't really care about it, it's just going to be big black. Because of the curls of his hair, it's always good to highlight the shape of it, which is what I went with by doing these big, dark sort of S shapes. And then I came in with a 4B and then made sort of smaller S shapes to indicate that it was hair and not just these big black S shapes. And then you can come in the end to highlight some key parts of the hair to make it pop a little more. And that's about it. And I'll highlight the shoulders to then put in colored paper at the end because I always like to do that with my portraits. It sort of makes them a little more unique and gives them something to give a little color since it's just a, pencil portrait. And so this is exotic paper. You can get this anywhere, but thanks for watching.